Welcome to the Hidden Truths, where the most intimate mysteries come to life. Don't forget to subscribe, like, and hit the bell so you never miss a secret. Now, let's pull back the veil. I used to believe that trust was the foundation of everything. In a marriage, in friendships, in family. Trust was the silent thread that held it all together. It's the thing that holds your heart steady when everything around you is shaking, the thing that tells you, this is safe. This is real. But that night, everything I knew came crashing down. It was a Thursday, just like any other. I had spent the day at work, quietly solving problems and meeting deadlines, coming home to the same steady rhythm of my life. Nothing had felt out of place, nothing had felt wrong. Not until the evening when I got the call. "Hey man. You good?" It was Alex, my best friend, the one person I trusted more than anyone in this world. I didn't think twice before picking up the phone. "Yeah, just finished up some stuff at work." "What's up?" I replied, sitting back in the couch, my feet resting on the coffee table. "I need to talk." "Something's come up," he said, his voice strained. It wasn't like him to sound so serious, so I instantly sat up, the hair on the back of my neck rising. "Yeah, sure. What's going on?" I asked, trying to calm my own racing thoughts. I don't know how to say this," he started, pausing for a moment like he was gathering the courage to speak. "It's about Laura." My heart dropped. Laura. My wife. My partner for 7 years, the woman I had trusted with everything. What about her? "What about Laura?" I asked, my voice sharper now, the edge of panic creeping in. "I didn't want to be the one to tell you, but I have to. I don't know how to explain this. But you need to know the truth, man. It's been going on for a while." I stood up, pacing the living room. My hands were shaking, my breath shallow. I could hear the panic in my own voice now. "What are you talking about? What the hell are you trying to say?" There was a long pause on the other end. When he spoke again, his words came out in a rush. "I never wanted it to happen, but it did. Laura and we've been seeing each other. It's been going on for a few months now. I don't know how to fix this, but you deserve to know." The world tilted sideways. My mind couldn't catch up to what he had just said. I wanted to scream, to throw the phone across the room. But instead I stood there, completely still, unable to process the words. I had been betrayed. By my wife. By my best friend. The two people I trusted most in the world had done something I could never have imagined. "Is this some kind of joke?" I finally managed to say, my voice low, almost a whisper. "No, man. I swear to God. I never wanted it to happen. But it did. I'm sorry, I never meant to hurt you. But it's the truth. I think you need to know." I hung up. I didn't know what else to do. I didn't know how to process this. The man who was my best friend, the man who had been there for me through everything, had been sleeping with my wife behind my back. For months. I couldn't move. My mind was still racing, running through the possibilities, but nothing made sense. My hands were cold, and my chest felt hollow. I had to see for myself. I had to know the truth. I didn't wait to confront Laura. I couldn't. I had to know if what Alex said was true. So I grabbed my coat and left the house, driving in a daze, my thoughts bouncing from anger to confusion to disbelief. It felt like I was living someone else's life. A life that had been shattered in a single sentence. When I arrived at our house, the lights were on. I stood in front of the door for a moment, wondering if I should knock or just walk in. I wasn't sure if I was ready to face her. But I wasn't going to wait anymore. I pushed the door open and stepped inside. Laura was sitting on the couch, reading a book, as if nothing was wrong. She looked up when I walked in, her face brightening when she saw me. "Hey babe, you're home early," she said, smiling, as if nothing had changed. As if everything was fine. But everything wasn't fine. The truth hung in the air between us like a heavy weight, suffocating the space around me. I didn't speak right away. I couldn't. All I could think about was the betrayal, the lies, the months of deceit. How could I not have seen it? How could I have been so blind? Laura, I finally said, my voice tight. Is it true? Her smile faltered. She put the book down and stood up slowly, her eyes avoiding mine. She didn't need to say anything. Her silence spoke volumes. You and Alex? I choked out, unable to hold back the surge of pain rising in my chest. You've been seeing him behind my back for months? She looked up at me then, and for a moment I saw something in her eyes, regret, guilt, maybe. But it didn't matter anymore. She had made her choice. I didn't want to hurt you, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. But I'd been feeling something for a long time. It just happened, Callum. I don't know how else to explain it. I took a step back, as if the words themselves had pushed me away. I couldn't breathe. My mind was spinning, but I couldn't make sense of anything anymore. I don't care how it happened, I said, my voice shaking now. I care about the fact that you lied to me. You went behind my back. With my best friend. I'm sorry, she said, her voice breaking. I never wanted this to happen. I didn't know how to tell you. I didn't know how to fix it. I stood there for what felt like an eternity. The anger was rising now, but it wasn't the sharp, furious kind of rage I expected. It was cold. Controlled. The kind of anger that knows the truth, knows the betrayal, but can't bring itself to tear everything apart just yet. I don't know who you are anymore, I said quietly. You've crossed a line, Laura. And I don't think I can forgive you for it. She opened her mouth to say something, but I didn't let her. I don't want to hear it. I just need you to leave. I didn't sleep that night. Not because of the anger or the heartbreak, but because I was stuck in a loop, one that kept repeating over and over. I wanted to scream, to break something, to make everything go away. But I knew better. That was the old me. The angry, reactive me. And that version of me had no place in the life I was trying to rebuild. The next morning, I packed a bag. I didn't know where I was going, but I couldn't stay in that house any longer. Not with her there, not with the weight of the lies pressing down on me. The first step in moving on was letting go of the anger. And that wasn't easy. I had to confront the truth. I had to admit to myself that I wasn't just angry at Laura and Alex. I was angry at myself for missing the signs, for trusting too blindly, for letting someone else's actions dictate my future. But I wasn't going to let this define me. I wasn't going to let them steal my peace. I made a choice. I was done. I was done with the lies, the betrayal, the past. It was time to move forward. The first few days after I left felt like walking through a fog. I wasn't sure where I was going, or what I was supposed to do next. I had always been the kind of person who needed a plan, who found comfort in structure. But right then, I didn't have a plan. I didn't even have a clear idea of what I was supposed to be feeling. I was numb. I stayed with Marcus for a few days, though he could tell I wasn't in the mood for company. He didn't push. He just let me be. His apartment was quiet, the kind of place that felt like an oasis after everything that had happened. But even here, I couldn't escape the feeling that something was wrong. That the life I had spent years building with Laura had crumbled in an instant. It wasn't just her betrayal. It was the realization that I had allowed myself to be blind to everything. I'd ignored the signs. The small, telling moments that I had written off as nothing, those late-night work calls, her newfound distance, the way she would always seem too busy for me, but not for Colton. I couldn't deny it anymore. I had been living a lie. But the truth was, I wasn't just angry at her. I was angry at myself for not seeing it sooner. For letting my trust blind me to what was right in front of me. And now, the consequences were too far-reaching. My life, my future, had been hijacked by someone else's decisions. And I had no one to blame but myself. It wasn't until the weekend that I finally felt ready to move. I needed space. I needed to get away from everything that reminded me of Laura. The house. The memories. The life we had built together. I couldn't keep living in that place. I needed a change. something different. Something that would force me to focus on myself and not on the wreckage of my past. I packed my things into a suitcase and checked into a small Airbnb cabin on the outskirts of town. It was quiet. Remote. The kind of place where you could hear the wind rustling through the trees and the sound of nothing at all. The first night was strange. I was alone with my thoughts, my fears, my regrets. But in a way, it was the silence I needed. The quiet that allowed me to finally let go of the pain. I spent the next few days hiking, reading, and writing. It was the kind of escape I never knew I needed. It gave me a chance to clear my head, to breathe without feeling like I was suffocating under the weight of everything. It was like I had been holding my breath for too long, and now, I could finally exhale. When I came back to town a few days later, I felt different. Lighter. It wasn't a sudden shift, but it was real. I had taken the first step toward healing, and while the process was far from over, I wasn't stuck anymore. I wasn't paralyzed by the betrayal. I went back to my old apartment to retrieve the rest of my things. I hadn't been back since I left, and walking into the place where so many of my memories with Laura had been created felt strangely peaceful. It was as though I had been granted permission to move on. As I was packing, I came across a box filled with old photographs and keepsakes, things I had forgotten about over the years. I stopped when I found an old letter from Laura. It was from our early years together, back when everything still felt new and exciting. I didn't know why I opened it. Maybe because I needed to remember who we had been, not just who she had become. It was a letter she had written to me on our anniversary, years before everything started falling apart. It was full of promises and dreams. The kind of letter that makes you believe in love. I read it once. Twice. The words were like a distant echo now, faded with time. The woman who wrote those words wasn't the same woman I had come to know. She had changed. She had lost herself, and in doing so, she had lost me too. But I didn't feel anger reading it. I didn't feel rage. I just felt sadness. For what we had lost, and for what she had chosen. But more than that, I felt gratitude. Gratitude that I had finally woken up. Grateful that I was free. I didn't need this letter anymore. I didn't need any of it. I placed it back in the box and closed it up, putting it in the corner of the closet. Then I took a deep breath and walked out. In the weeks that followed, I focused on myself. I began seeing a therapist, someone I had been putting off for years, but now felt necessary. I threw myself into work. I started painting again, something I hadn't done since before everything fell apart. And slowly, but surely, I began to rebuild. Not my marriage, not my life with Laura, but myself. I learned to forgive myself for the mistakes I made, for the times I had let myself become complacent. I learned that sometimes, the most important thing you can do is move forward, even when it feels like you don't know how. And then, there was Elena. We met at a local coffee shop one afternoon, completely by accident. She was standing in line in front of me, her smile warm and genuine as she ordered her drink. I didn't think much of it at first, but as she turned around, our eyes met, and something shifted. We talked for a few minutes, small talk at first. But then it turned into something more. She was different from anyone I had ever met. Quiet, calm, and unassuming, but there was something about her that made me feel seen. Like she understood without needing to ask. We exchanged numbers and started meeting for lunch, then dinner. There was no rush, no pressure. It wasn't about filling the hole left by Laura. It was about starting fresh. About learning what it meant to be with someone who didn't come with the baggage of the past. A few months later, I stood in a different place. I wasn't the man I had been before. I wasn't broken, I wasn't lost. I had rebuilt. I had found strength in the silence, in the quiet moments where I could finally hear my own thoughts without the weight of someone else's actions pressing down on me. And that was when I realized I didn't need her to move forward. I didn't need anyone to validate my worth. I was finally whole again. Not because of what I had lost, but because of what I had gained. I visited Laura's grave once, just to say goodbye. To close that chapter of my life for good. I stood there for a moment, the weight of everything falling into place. The past wasn't something I could undo, but it wasn't something that had to define me anymore. And when I turned to leave, I wasn't carrying the weight of betrayal anymore. I wasn't carrying the anger. I wasn't carrying the hurt. I was carrying peace. The days following my decision to move on felt like I was waking up from a long, drawn-out dream. There was still the numbness, still the echoes of what had happened, but there was also a clarity that had started to take root inside me. I wasn't angry anymore. Not in the way I was before. I had let go of the rage that had once consumed me, and I was left with something else, something calm, something solid. But there was still the matter of the aftermath. The divorce papers were filed, but there were still pieces to pick up. And those pieces, while small, were crucial to my peace of mind. I wasn't going to let Marissa and Lucas off easily. I couldn't. Not after everything they had taken from me. It wasn't about revenge, it was about justice. They had destroyed my life, my marriage, and now they would have to face the consequences of their actions. I had a plan. A quiet one. One that didn't involve grand confrontations or rage-fueled arguments. It was more subtle than that. It was about dismantling the foundation they had built their lives on. I started with the most obvious first, the finances. Marissa might have thought she could walk away from this unscathed, but she wasn't going to get away with it. I had been too trusting, too lenient. But now, I was taking control. I contacted my lawyer, a quiet man named Derek, who had helped me through the early stages of the divorce. We'd already sorted the major assets, our house, the cars, the savings account. But there were still things I hadn't touched. Things I hadn't even realized were there. Get everything, I told Derek. Every single account. Every piece of property that she thinks I don't know about. I want it all. I want it locked down. Derek didn't ask why. He didn't need to. He had seen enough of the mess Marissa had caused. He knew what I wanted, and he would get it for me. I didn't need to confront Marissa. I had already seen enough to know that her guilt would be a quiet thing. She wouldn't fight me for what was mine. She didn't have the strength to. She'd already given up. But Lucas? He was a different story. I wasn't going to let him think he could just slide by, thinking he had won. No. He had crossed a line, my line. And I wasn't going to let him walk away from that. I reached out to an old contact of mine, someone I knew through business. His name was Eric, and he had connections in the local press. He wasn't a reporter, but he knew people who were. He owed me a favor from a few years back when I had helped him with a real estate deal. Now, it was time for me to call it in. I didn't want the world to know what had happened, not yet, but I needed to make sure that Lucas felt the weight of his actions. I needed to make sure his little world was shaken. And so, I asked Eric to plant a story. Something small at first. A whisper. An anonymous tip to a journalist about the business connections Lucas had been keeping under wraps. He was involved in shady deals, always looking for the next big thing. And that was a story people would pay attention to. Eric didn't ask questions. He just promised he would get it done. The next few days were filled with a kind of quiet anticipation. I didn't reach out to anyone. I didn't speak to Marissa or Lucas. I didn't need to. I knew things were starting to move behind the scenes. The story Eric planted had begun to take root, and soon, it would grow. It was only a matter of time before Lucas started to panic. But in the meantime, I focused on myself. I kept working. I kept painting. I made plans for the future, plans that didn't involve Marissa, plans that didn't involve Lucas. I was rebuilding my life, piece by piece, and every day that passed felt like I was getting closer to something that resembled peace. I also started taking more time for Elena. We hadn't been seeing each other for long, but every time I spent with her, I felt like I was slowly pulling myself back together. She was gentle, kind, and patient with me, but she didn't try to fix me. She didn't try to fill the emptiness I had been carrying around for so long. She simply was. And that was enough. I began to realize that there was something different about Elena. Something that felt like a breath of fresh air. She didn't carry the baggage that Marissa had, she didn't expect anything from me. She didn't demand my time or my attention. She simply was in my life, and for once, I felt like that was all I needed. No strings. No pressure. Just a quiet understanding. But even with Elena, I knew that things weren't completely right yet. I still had to finish what I had started. One evening, about a week later, I got a call from Derek. He told me that everything had been locked down, the financial assets, the investments, the hidden properties Marissa had tried to keep from me. The house was mine. The money was mine. Everything was going according to plan. I had won. But there was still one thing left to do. It was a Saturday when I finally decided to take action. I called Lucas. I didn't want to do this over the phone, but I wasn't going to give him the chance to ignore me. I wasn't going to give him the chance to hide behind texts or excuses. When he answered, I didn't waste time. "Lucas," I said, my voice steady, controlled. "I know what you did. I know everything. And I don't need to hear your excuses. I'm not interested in the lies you've been telling yourself. But you need to understand something. You don't get to walk away from this without consequences." There was a brief pause on the other end. Then I heard him speak, his voice faltering, almost defensive. "You don't understand, Callum," he said, trying to sound calm, but I could hear the tremor in his voice. "It wasn't like that. I never meant for it to happen. We were just talking. We never intended to hurt you." I didn't let him finish. "It doesn't matter what you intended. The damage has been done, Lucas. And now you're going to face the consequences." I hung up before he could say another word. The next morning, the story broke. It wasn't huge at first. A few small mentions on local blogs and a few mentions on social media. But it was enough. It was enough to get people talking. Enough for the board at his company to take notice. Enough for investors to start pulling their funds, one by one. And as the whispers spread, I knew something had changed. Lucas had lost his grip on the world he thought he controlled. The cracks in his perfect image were starting to show. I didn't want to destroy him. I didn't need to. He had done that on his own. A few weeks later, I received a call from Marissa. She was crying. Not in the way I had imagined, but in a way that felt empty. Like she was pleading for something she knew she couldn't have. "I've lost everything, Callum," she said, her voice breaking. "I didn't think it would come to this. I didn't think I'd lose everything I cared about." I didn't say anything at first. I just listened. "I'm sorry," she whispered. I didn't need her apology anymore. "You should have thought about that before you chose him," I said quietly. "But it's too late now." I hung up without saying another word. I didn't feel triumphant. I didn't feel satisfied. I just felt done. And that, I realized, was the only thing that truly mattered. The weeks after Marissa's call were a blur of decisions. The pain had dulled to a constant hum, like background noise that I could ignore if I tried hard enough. The walls of my life were beginning to settle again, piece by piece. It wasn't healing, exactly. It was more like rearranging the rubble into something that was livable. I kept my distance from everyone. I didn't need the reminders. I didn't need the excuses. I was done with the people who had betrayed me. I was done with the versions of myself that let them get away with it. But even in the quiet, something lingered. The knowledge that, despite everything, I still didn't feel whole. I hadn't rebuilt myself, not really. I had just rearranged the pieces, painted over the cracks. And I knew, deep down, I couldn't keep going like this. The phone rang late one night. I knew who it was before I even checked the screen. "Callum," Marissa said when I answered, her voice shaky. "Please. I need to talk to you." I sat up in bed, the phone pressed to my ear. "About what?" I don't know how to fix it," she said, and there was a small sob in her voice. "I never meant for any of this to happen. I never wanted to hurt you. I didn't think it would go this far. Please just listen." I didn't want to. I didn't want to hear the excuses, the words that had already poisoned the well. But I found myself listening anyway, because I knew the truth. I had to hear it all. I had to know how far she had gone. How deep the betrayal had truly run. "I've lost everything, Callum," she whispered. "I don't know who I am anymore. I thought I could start over, but nothing feels right. I want to fix this. I want you to forgive me." "Forgive you?" I repeated, the words tasting bitter on my tongue. "Do you even understand what you did to me, Marissa? Do you understand how deeply you've cut? It wasn't just a mistake. It wasn't just a mistake with one man. It was a betrayal of everything I thought I knew about you, about us. And now you want me to forgive you? Because you've lost everything? What about me, Marissa?" "I know," she said, her voice trembling. I know I can't fix it, but I'm asking for one thing, please. Can we just talk?" I stood up from the bed, pacing the room, trying to figure out what I was supposed to feel. My heart felt heavy, like it was too full of anger, sorrow, and confusion to move. I had lived in this place long enough to know the difference between what was right and what was just another excuse. "I'm done talking, Marissa," I said, my voice steady. "I'm done giving you a chance to explain yourself. I've spent too much time trying to understand you, trying to figure out what went wrong. But you're not going to keep doing this. Not to me. Not to us. You destroyed everything, and I won't stand by while you play the victim." There was a long pause on the other end. Then I heard her voice, barely a whisper. "I'm sorry." "I know," I replied, not with anger, but with a quiet finality. "I know you are. But it doesn't change anything." I hung up the phone before she could say anything more. The next few days were different. There was no more conflict, no more tension. But there was still that gnawing feeling of unfinished business. Marissa's apology didn't feel like a lifeline. It felt like a reminder of how far we had fallen. And as much as I tried to put it behind me, I knew one thing for sure. I couldn't go back. I spent the following weekend working in the garden, trying to occupy my mind. There was something about the physical labor, the rhythm of digging and planting, that gave me a sense of calm. I found it grounding, like I was connecting with something more real than the mess of emotions and deceit I had been drowning in. Elena came over that afternoon. I hadn't told her much about what had happened. She knew I was going through a tough time, but I hadn't gotten into the details. The trust was still there, though. We were still figuring each other out. But that day, when she stood there with a coffee in her hand, watching me pull weeds from the flower bed, I felt something shift. There was no pressure. No expectation. Just her presence. "You've been busy," she said, looking around at the garden I had spent hours working on. "Trying to get my head straight," I said, wiping my hands on my jeans. "Trying to get my life straight." She nodded, stepping closer. "I get it," she said, her voice soft. "And if you ever want to talk about it, I'm here." "I know," I replied, giving her a small smile. "And I appreciate that. But honestly, I think I'm done talking. I've talked about it enough. I need to move forward." She studied me for a moment, her eyes searching mine. "And do you think you're ready for that?" "I don't think I have a choice," I said. "I've been stuck in the past for long enough. It's time to let go." Elena stepped closer, placing a hand on my shoulder. The touch was light, comforting, not asking for anything, but offering everything. For the first time in a long time, I felt like I wasn't carrying the weight of the past. I felt like I had room to breathe. The weeks that followed were a blur of new beginnings. I moved forward, not with anger, but with a quiet sense of resolve. I knew there would still be hard moments, still days when I would wonder if I had made the right decision. But those moments became fewer, and my days began to feel more like mine. I stopped checking in on Marissa, stopped wondering what she was doing. I stopped asking myself if she was happy. Because the truth was, I didn't care anymore. I had been consumed by her betrayal for so long that I had forgotten what it felt like to focus on myself. One evening, about a month after the final divorce papers were signed, I received a message. It was from Lucas. Callum, I know we haven't talked in a while, and I know I don't deserve your forgiveness. But I need you to know that I regret everything. I never meant to hurt you. I know what I did was wrong. I need you to know that I'm sorry. I stared at the screen for a long time, my finger hovering over the reply button. I didn't need to reply. I didn't owe him anything. But something about his message, something about the way he sounded, broken and genuine, made me hesitate. I didn't respond right away. I let the message sit for hours, thinking about the person I had been, the man who had trusted both of them, and the man I had become. Eventually, I sent a simple message back. I don't know if I can forgive you, Lucas. But I don't hate you either. I just need to move on. I need to leave everything behind. I didn't expect him to reply, but he did. And when he did, his words were simple. I understand. I'm sorry for everything. And with that, I closed that chapter of my life for good. I didn't hear from Marissa or Lucas again after that. There was no need. The story was over. I focused on Elena. We spent time together, quiet evenings, long walks, and easy conversations. I didn't need to rush. I didn't need to force anything. For the first time in years, I felt like I was living for me. The past no longer held me. The betrayal no longer haunted me. And though the scars were still there, I didn't feel the need to pick at them anymore. There's a strange thing that happens when you finally let go of everything. You stop thinking about it, stop overanalyzing it, and the weight you've been carrying for so long starts to feel lighter. It doesn't happen overnight, but when it does, you realize you've moved past it, moved beyond the betrayal, beyond the heartbreak, beyond the lies. You're free. For the first time in months, I felt like I was finally breathing again. The anger that had fueled me, the rage that had driven my every decision, was gone. In its place, there was something quieter, something more serene. And for the first time, I was okay with being still. My relationship with Elena was becoming something solid, but not rushed. It was new, untainted by the past, and it was becoming clear to me that this was what I had needed all along. The morning I woke up feeling like myself again, I checked my phone. I hadn't heard from Marissa in weeks. I had moved on from her. And I had moved on from what had happened with her and Lucas. But there it was. A message from her. Callum, I'm not sure why I'm reaching out, but I need to tell you that I finally understand. I'm sorry for everything, and I hope one day you can forgive me for what I did. You were always good to me, and I was blind to that. I'm sorry. Truly. I stared at the message for a long moment, my finger hovering over the screen, unsure of what I wanted to do. I could ignore it. I could delete it and keep moving forward. But something in me made me pause. She wasn't looking for forgiveness. She wasn't asking me to take her back. She wasn't even asking for anything, really. She was simply acknowledging what she had done, and that, in itself, was something I hadn't heard from her before. I took a deep breath and replied, keeping it simple. I'm not sure I can forgive you, Marissa. But I don't need to. I'm okay now. I hope you find peace too. I didn't expect a reply. But I got one anyway. I understand. Thank you for letting me say this. And with that, I let go. A few weeks later, I stood in front of the house that had once been mine. The house I had spent so many years in, the house I had thought was our forever. It was empty now. The moving company had come and gone, and everything that had once been our home had been packed away. Furniture, memories, dreams, all gone. It wasn't the first time I had visited it since the divorce, but it was the first time I felt at peace standing there. I wasn't here to relive the past. I was here to close the door on it. I stood for a moment, looking at the empty windows, the silent porch. I didn't feel sad. I didn't feel angry. I just felt free. And then I turned around and walked away. The next few months were a blur of change. I moved into a new apartment, a fresh space where I could finally breathe without the weight of memories pressing down on me. Elena and I continued to grow closer. It wasn't rushed, like I said before, but it was steady. She wasn't asking me to forget the past, but she made it clear that she wasn't trying to replace it. She was just here now, and that was enough. I started traveling more. Not to run away from anything, but to find new things, new experiences, new perspectives. I explored cities, I took photographs, and I met people who were just as willing as I was to leave the past behind and embrace the present. And for the first time in a long time, I stopped looking over my shoulder. One night, about a year after everything had fallen apart, I stood outside a small cafe, waiting for Elena. The sun had set, and the city was alive with lights, but there was a peacefulness in the air. I could feel it, like everything was finally settling into place. She walked up to me, smiling. She always smiled when she saw me, and I couldn't help but smile back. "You're looking at me like you've figured something out," she said, her voice teasing. "I think I have," I said, taking her hand in mine. "I think I've figured out that I'm exactly where I need to be." She raised an eyebrow. "And where's that?" "With you," I said, my voice steady. "Where I can breathe again." She smiled softly, and for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel like I was pretending to be something I wasn't. I didn't feel like I had to make up for my past mistakes or hold on to the anger that used to define me. I was just me. And for the first time, that was enough. The next few months were filled with new beginnings. Elena and I continued to grow together, but this time it felt different. I wasn't just looking for someone to fill the emptiness left by Marissa. I was looking for someone who could walk beside me, who could understand the quiet strength I had learned to find within myself. And Elena, in all her quiet grace, had become that person. A year after the divorce, I finally felt like I was standing on solid ground. The last of my past was behind me, and I had built something entirely new, myself. Marissa had moved on too, as I had seen through a few social media updates and casual mentions from friends. She had found her own way, just as I had found mine. But neither of us was the same. We had been shaped by the choices we had made, and now, we were both living with the consequences of those choices. But I wasn't angry anymore. I wasn't bitter. I didn't need to hold on to what had been taken from me. I had found peace. One day, I received a message from my lawyer. The last piece of my past was finally behind me. Everything was settled, divorce, assets, everything. I was free to move forward, without any lingering ties. And just like that, I realized that I had been free all along. As I sat at the kitchen table in my new apartment, a cup of coffee in hand, I looked out the window. The world was still spinning, still moving, but for the first time, I didn't feel like I was being dragged along with it. I was moving at my own pace now, with no one holding me back. I didn't need to look back. I was exactly where I was meant to be. Thank you for being with us on The Hidden Truths. If you enjoyed this, leave a like, drop a comment, and be sure to subscribe. The secrets are waiting to be revealed. See you soon.